The side we want is opposite to the largest angle, so it's the largest side, and the largest side is called the hypotenuse. This is the side we want. We must first get the other two sides. The side opposite the biggest angle is called the hypotenuse, and the side opposite angle x is called the opposite side. The side we want is called the adjacent. The answer is adjacent. This is the side we want. You can see it is opposite to angle x, so it's called the opposite side. The answer is opposite. The side we want is opposite to the largest angle, so it's the largest side, and the largest side is called the hypotenuse. The answer is hypotenuse. This is the side we want. We must first get the other two sides. The side opposite the biggest angle is called the hypotenuse, and the side opposite angle x is called the opposite side. The side we want is called the adjacent. The answer is adjacent. This is the side we want. You can see it is opposite to angle x, so it's called the opposite side. The answer is opposite. In this question, we want sine x. Before we find sine x, we must label the sides. The longest side is 89, and we know it's called the hypotenuse, so we write letter h. If we go opposite angle x, we will get 80, so 80 is the opposite. We use letter O. So the last one is going to be adjacent. Now we need to know the law for sine x. You must remember this triangle. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. We now replace opposite with 80 and hypotenuse with 89. The answer is sine x equals 80 over 89. In this question, we want to find cosine x. Before we can do that, we must label the sides. 89 is the longest side, and we know it's called the hypotenuse, letter h. 80 is opposite to angle x, so we call it the opposite, letter O. And 39 is called the adjacent, letter A. We need to remember this triangle for cosine. Cosine is A over h. We now replace A and O by the numbers in the diagram, and we get cosine x is 39 over 89. In this question, we want to find tan x. Before we can do that, we must label the sides. The longest side is 89, and we know that's called the hypotenuse, letter h. The side opposite to angle x is 80, so we can label it the opposite, letter O. And the last one is called the adjacent, letter A. We must remember the triangle for tan. Here it is. Tan x is equal to opposite over adjacent. We now replace opposite and adjacent with the numbers in the diagram, and we get the answer tan x is equal to 80 over 39. In this diagram, we want to find sine x. Before we can do that, we must label the sides. The longest side is 65. We know it's called a hypotenuse. We use letter h. The side opposite to angle x is 56, so it's the opposite side, letter O. and the last one, 33 meters, is called the adjacent letter A. We must remember the triangle for sine x. Here is the triangle. Sine x is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. We now replace opposite and hypotenuse with the numbers in the diagram, and we get the answer sine x equals 56 over 65. In this question we want cosine x. Before we can do that, we must label the sides. The longest side is 65, and we know it's called the hypotenuse, letter H. The side opposite to angle x is 56, so it's the opposite, or letter O. And the third side, 33 meters, is called the adjacent, letter A. We must remember the formula for cosine. We use this triangle. To find cosine x, it's A over H. We now substitute A and H by the numbers in the diagram, and we get cosine x is 33 over 65. In this question we want tan x. Before we can do that, we must label the sides. The longest side is 65, and we know it's called the hypotenuse, letter H. The side opposite to angle x is 56, so we use letter O, O for opposite. The last one is 33 meters, and it's called the adjacent, or letter A. We must remember the triangle for tan. Here it is. Tan is equal to opposite over adjacent. We now replace opposite and adjacent with the numbers in the diagram, and we get the answer tan x is 56 over 33. In this question we want tan x. Before we can do that, we must label the three sides. The longest side is 13, and we know this is the hypotenuse, so we use letter H. The side opposite angle x is 12, so we label it with letter O, O for opposite. And the last side is 5 meters, and this is called the adjacent, letter A. We must remember the triangle for tan. Here is the triangle. To get tan, we say tan x equals opposite over adjacent. We now replace the letters O and A by the numbers in the question, and we get tan x equals 12 over 13. The answer to this question is cosine 39 equals 0.7771 to 4 decimal places. Here is how you do this on a calculator. First you click cosine, then you put 3, 9, close bracket, then equals. This number is the long answer. We don't want a long answer, we want 4 decimals. So we go shift, set up. We need to fix, which is number 6. We now say, what do we want? 4 decimals, so number 4. There is the answer, 0.7771. The answer to this question is sine 29 degrees is equal to 0.4848 to 4 decimal places. Here is how you use a calculator to do this question. You first click sine, then put in 29, close bracket, and equals. This is the long answer. We want to cut it to 4 decimal places, so we must go shift, set up. Fix means cut, so we will go 6 and 09. No, I want 4 decimals, so I go 4, and the answer is here on the calculator, 0.4848. The answer to this question is cosine 36 degrees is equal to 0.8090 to 4 decimal places. To do this on the calculator, we click cosine, we click 3, 6, we click close bracket and equals. This is the long answer. We don't want all the decimal places, so we do shift, set up and choose number 6 for fix, 6. We want to fix it to 4, not 0, not 9, but 4, so put 4, and there is the answer, 0.8090. The answer to this question is tan 18 degrees is equal to 0.3249 to 4 decimal places. To do this on the calculator, this is what you do. You press tan 18 close bracket equal, and there is the long answer. We don't want all the answer, we want 4 decimals. So we go shift, set up, fix is number 6, so number 6, and 4 decimals means number 4, and there is the answer, 0.3249. The answer to this question is tan 71 degrees is equal to 2.9042 to 4 decimal places. To do this on the calculator, we go tan 71 close bracket, then equals. This is the long answer. We don't want all the decimal places, so we go shift, set up, we choose fix, that's number 6, and we've got to fix it to 4, so we choose number 4, and there is the answer, 2.9042. The answer to this question is A equals 81 degrees, nearest degree. Before we look at how to do it on a calculator, we look at the question. We want the angle whose cosine is this number. So we must write down cosine A is 0.1564, and then to get to the angle we go shift cosine of the number in the question. So let's show you on a calculator. We go shift cosine 0.1564 close bracket equal. This answer has decimal places. I don't want any decimal places, so I go shift, set up. I want to fix 6 to 0 decimal, 0, and the answer is 81 degrees. The answer to this question is 0.6366 to 4 decimal places. To do this on a calculator, we go tan 32.48 close bracket equals. This is the long answer. We don't want all decimal places, we want 4. So we go shift, set up, choose number 6, that's fix, and then choose 4 decimal places, 4, and there is the answer, 0.6366. The answer to this question is the angle is equal to 26.1 degrees, 1 decimal place. Before we look at the calculator, let's go back to the question. We want an angle, and the tangent we know is 0.49. So we write down tangent of angle A is equal to 0.49. We want to go back to the angle, so we use shift tan of the number in the question. So on the calculator, shift tan 0.49 close bracket equals. This is the long answer. I want one decimal. So we go Shift, set up, fix, and we want one decimal, so we go 1, and the answer is 26.1 degrees. The answer to the question is A equals 63 degrees to the nearest degree. Before we use the calculator, let's go back to the question. It says find the angle whose sine is this number 0.8910. So we first start with sine of the angle is equal to the number in the question. We want to go back to the angle, so we have to use Shift sine the number in the question. So let's do this on the calculator. Shift sine 0.8910, close the bracket, equals. This is the full answer. We don't want any decimals in the answer, so we've got to do Shift, set up. We want to fix it, so number 6, and we don't want any decimals, so 0 decimal, click 0. There is the answer, 63 degrees, that's it. Here is the answer to the question. Angle A is equal to 48 degrees to the nearest degree. Before we look at the calculator and how to do it, let's look at the question. Question says find the angle whose cosine is equal to this number. So we start with cosine of angle A is equal to the number in the question. We want to go back to the angle, so we must do Shift cosine the number in the question. So using the calculator, we do it like this. Shift cosine 0.6691, close the bracket, equals. There is the answer. This is the full answer. We don't want any decimals. Nearest degree, so you have to go Shift, set up. We need to fix, that's number 6. Fix it to 0 decimals. 0, and there is the answer, 48 degrees. Here is the answer to the question. Angle A is equal to 85 degrees to the nearest degree. Before I show you how to do it on the calculator, let's go back to the question. It says find the angle whose tangent is equal to this number. So we start with this law. Tangent of angle A is equal to 11.43. We want to go back to the angle, so we must write Shift tan 11.43. On a calculator, this is what we do. Shift tan 11.43, close the bracket, equals. This is the full answer. We don't want any decimal places, so we go Shift, set up, fix, that is number 6. We want to fix it to 0 decimals, so we go 0, and the answer is 85 degrees. The answer to this question is A equals 78 degrees nearest degree. Before I show you how to do this on a calculator, let's go back to the question. We want to find the angle whose tangent is equal to 4.705. So we start with this line. Tangent of angle A is 4.705. We need to go back to get the angle, so we go Shift tan 4.705, and we get the answer 78 degrees. Here's how we do it on a calculator. Shift tan 4.705, close bracket, equals. Now this is the full answer. It has decimal places. We want nearest degree. We don't want decimal places. We go shift, set up, fix means round, and we want 0 decimal, no decimal, so put 0, and there's the answer, 78 degrees. The answer to this question is angle A is equal to 71.8 degrees to 1 decimal place. Before I show you how to use the calculator, let's go back to the question. Find the angle whose sine is equal to 0.95. So we write down sine of angle A is equal to 0.95. We want angle A, so we go back to the angle using shift sine 0.95, and we get the answer 71.8. On a calculator, this is what we do. Shift sine 0.95 close bracket equal. This is the full answer. We only want 1 decimal place, so we must go shift, set up, fix, and then fix to 1 decimal place, that's 1, and the answer on the calculator is 71.8. The answer to this question is the angle is equal to 20.5 degrees to 1 decimal place. Before I show you how to do this on a calculator, let's go back to the question. We want to find the angle whose sine is equal to 0.35. So we must start with this line. Sine of angle A is equal to 0.35. We want angle A, so we go back and do shift sine 0.35, and the answer is 20.5 degrees. On a calculator, this is how you do it. Shift sine 0.35 close bracket equal. Now there is the answer. We don't want all of the decimal places, we want 1. So we go shift, set up, choose fix, that's number 6, and we want 1 decimal, so we choose number 1. There is the answer, 20.5 degrees. Here is the answer to the question. Angle A is equal to 70.7 degrees. Before I show you how to do it on a calculator, let's go back to the question. It says, find the angle whose cosine is equal to 0.33. So first we have to do this. Cosine of the angle A is equal to 0.33. We want to go back to the angle A, so we do shift cosine 0.33. Now on a calculator, this is what we do. Shift cosine 0.33 close bracket equals. Now there is the answer, but we don't want all of it. We want 1 decimal place, so we go shift, set up, fix is number 6, and we want 1 decimal, so we go 1, and there is the answer, 70.7 degrees. In this question, we need to calculate the value of y to 1 decimal place. Y is equal to the opposite of angle 25, so we write opposite. The number in the question is 22, and that's the longest side. The longest side is hypotenuse, letter H. Opposite and hypotenuse is the triangle sine. We want y. Y is up, so we need to multiply sine by hypotenuse to get the answer. So opposite is equal to sine multiply hypotenuse. We know the hypotenuse is 22 and the angle is 25, so the next step is y equals sine 25 multiply 22. We now bring in a calculator and do this question with a calculator. So we go sine 25, close the bracket, remember close the bracket, times 22 equals. Now this answer has too many decimal places. We want one decimal place. Shift, set up, fix is what we'd use, and one decimal place. The answer is 9.3 inches to one decimal place. In this question, we need to find the length of side x to one decimal place. Step 1, we will label the sides. The side opposite the angle is called the opposite, letter O. The longest side is called the hypotenuse, letter H, and the side we want is the last one, adjacent, letter A. Now, we don't need the opposite and we don't want it, so take it out. We now have adjacent hypotenuse. We use the cosine triangle. We want to find A, remember. A is up, so we cover it. We will multiply cosine by H to get A. There is the law. Now we see H is 26, we will put it here. We see the angle is 19 degrees, we will put it with cosine. Here is what we get. We now use a calculator for this. Okay, cosine 19, so cosine 19. Remember to close the bracket because this is the angle. Now multiply by 26, press equals. There is the angle, there is the answer for this question. The answer is 24 point and a lot of decimal places. We don't want all the decimal places, so we go shift, set up, fix, and 1. There is the answer, 24.6, and the unit is millimeters. In this question, we want to find the side AB. We don't have the hypotenuse, so we can forget it. What we have is this number. This number is opposite to the angle, so it's opposite. Hypotenuse we don't need, we don't have. This one is the adjacent. So we have O and A. The triangle we use is the tan triangle. Tan is opposite over adjacent. We want A, so we will divide opposite by tan. There is the law. We now replace opposite by 44.5, and we must put the angle 56 with tan. We get this. We now use a calculator to do this question. So we have here a fraction, so we use the fraction key. We put 44.5 and then we come down by going to the right. We now want tan 56. Don't forget to close the bracket. Now we must come out to the end, so we press the right arrow. Now we press equals. Now the answer has many decimal places. We only want one decimal place, so we go shift, set up, 6, and then 1. The answer on the calculator is 30.0 centimeters. In this question, we want to find BC, this line here. We know this is angle 60. If we come away from it, we will see opposite. So BC is the opposite, letter O. We don't have the hypotenuse, we don't want it, but this side must be the adjacent, letter A. we have two letters, O and A, so the triangle we use is tan. The one we want is O, so we cover it, and then we can get the answer by multiplying tan by A. This is the first step. Opposite is equal to tan multiplied by A. We now put in the numbers from the question. A is 23.1, and with tan you need to put in 60 degrees. This is what we get. We now must use a calculator to get this answer. So, tan 60, close the bracket, remember to close the bracket, times 23.1 and equals. Now there is the answer, but we don't want all the decimal points, we want one decimal place. So we go shift, set up, fix, that's number 6, to one place. There is the answer, 40.0. So the final answer is BC equals 40.0 meters to one decimal place. In this question we want side Y. You can see that it is opposite to the angle 24, so we call this the opposite side. The side 12 inches is the longest side, and we know it's the hypotenuse, letter H. We now have opposite, hypotenuse, so we use the triangle for sine. We want to calculate the opposite, so we cover it, and looking at the triangle we will get sine multiplied by H to give opposite. Here is the law. We now replace the numbers in the question into this law. 12 goes to H, and we must put 24 degrees with sine. This is what we get. We now use a calculator to get the answer. So start with sine, and then 24, close the bracket, remember, multiply by 12, press equals. Now this is the full answer, but we only want one decimal place, so we go shift, set up, fix is to cut it, so we go 6 and then fix to one decimal place, and the answer there 4.9. so we have Y is equal to 4.9 inches, don't forget the unit, one decimal place. In this question we want side X to one decimal place. We start from the angle and go out, and we see opposite to the angle is this, so this is the opposite. This is the longest side, which we know as hypotenuse, so letter H is this one. We want letter X, this must be the other one, adjacent letter A. Now we don't need opposite, so we can take it out. Now we have A and H. The triangle is the cosine triangle, because cosine is A over H. We want A, so we cover it. We can see that A is equal to these two things together multiplied. So A is cosine multiplied hypotenuse. There's the law. We now replace H by 9. Don't forget 20 must go with cosine. There's what we get. Now we've got to do this with a calculator, and we get cosine 20. So cosine to 0, close the bracket, don't forget close the bracket, multiplied by 9 equals. Now there is the long answer. We wanted one decimal, not all the answer, so we go shift, set up, fix is number 6, and fix to one decimal, so number 1, and the answer is there, 8.5. So the answer is X equals 8.5 millimeters, remember the unit, one decimal place. In In this question, we want to find the length of AB, this line here. We start from the angle and we go opposite to this line. This is the opposite. Now, the long side is the hypotenuse. We don't want it, we want this side. This side must be the adjacent letter A. We now need O and A, a triangle to help us. The triangle is the tangent triangle. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. But we want the adjacent, so we cover it and we get the law adjacent is equal to opposite over tangent. We now put the numbers in from the question. The opposite is 20.2. We must put 57 degrees with tangent and we get this. We now have to bring the calculator up and finish the question. This is a fraction. One number up, one number down, so we use the fraction key. We put in 20.2, then we press come down and we go tangent, don't forget tangent, and 57 and close the bracket. Now we can't stay here, we must go to the right, so we press the right arrow. Now we will press equals. Now this is the answer. All the answers in the question have one decimal place, so let's round this to one decimal place with shift, set up, 6 and then 1. There's the answer, 13.1. So we finish with 13.1 centimeters, one decimal place. In this question we want BC, this line here. Here is the angle. If we come opposite, we get BC. BC is the opposite. This angle is the adjacent. We have opposite, adjacent. That's the tan triangle. We want to calculate opposite, so we cover it, and then we use this triangle to get the law. Opposite is equal to tan multiplied by adjacent. Now we replace the numbers in the question. A is 1.1 and the angle must go with tan. We get this. We now use a calculator to finish the question. We need tan 60. Tan 60. Remember to close the bracket and then multiply 1.1 and then equals. Now this answer, we need to change it into decimal, so we'll go SD. There is the decimal answer, and we now go shift, set up to change it to one decimal place. We need number 6, then we need one decimal, and again change it to there. There is the answer, 1.9. The answer is BC is 1.9 meters to one decimal place. In this question we want to find angle X. We start by labeling the sides. This is the longest side. We know it's called the hypotenuse, letter H. This side is the adjacent, letter A. We have A and H. We use the triangle for cosine. Cosine is A over H. We want the angle, so we must first find the cosine. Cover the cosine, and then you will see cosine equals adjacent divided by hypotenuse. We now replace adjacent with 43, hypotenuse with 50 to get this. Now we want the angle, so we must go back. Go back, we use shift cosine. So X is equal to shift cosine the fraction 43 over 50. We now use a calculator. So to do this, we must first go shift cosine. This is a fraction, make a fraction. 43 come down 50. Remember to go to the right and close the bracket. You can see we have this bracket. Now press equals. There is the answer. We don't want all the answer, we want nearest degree without decimal, so we go shift, set up, fix number 6 and 0 because 0 decimal places. The answer is 31 degrees. So x is equal to 31 degrees, nearest degree. In this question, we want to find the size of angle x. This is the longest side, so we call it the hypotenuse, letter H. If we look at the angle and go opposite, we see 70. This is the opposite side. Opposite and hypotenuse, you use the sine triangle. Now we want to find the angle. Before we do that, we must find the sine. So cover sine, and we see sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. We now replace opposite and hypotenuse by the two numbers, opposite 70, hypotenuse 90, and we get this. Now we don't want sine x, we want x. We go back to the angle. Go back means shift sine. So x equals shift sine this fraction. We now bring in a calculator to do this. So look at this, shift sine. So shift sine. Now here is a fraction, so we make a fraction. Fraction. 70 is up, 7, 0. We must come down to get the next number, 99, 0. I want to close the bracket. Don't close it now, go to the right. Close the bracket, then equals. Here is the answer in degrees with a decimal. We don't want any decimal, we want nearest degree. So we will go shift, set up, fix 6, and 0 degrees is 0. There is the answer, 51. So the answer is x equals 51 degrees, nearest degree. In this question, we want to find the size of angle theta. So there is the angle. If we come across opposite, 4 is called the opposite, letter O. This is the adjacent, so we call it letter A. We have opposite adjacent, so we use triangle tan. We want the angle. Before we do that, we must find the tan, cover tan. Tan is equal to opposite over adjacent. So tan theta will equal 4 over 9. We just put 4 for O and 9 for A. We don't want tan theta. We want to go to the angle. So we go shift tan. Theta is equal to shift tan of this fraction. We now use a calculator. Shift tan. So shift tan. Now we have a fraction, so use the fraction key. The top number is 4. Press 4, come down and press 9. Don't close the bracket now, move to the right. Now close the bracket. Press equals. This is the angle. We don't want all the decimal places, we want nearest degree, so we go shift, set up, fix number 6 and 0 decimals, so 0. There is the answer, 24. So the answer is theta equals 24 degrees to the nearest degree. In this question we want to find angle x. This side is the longest side, it's a hypotenuse, letter H. This side is the adjacent, letter A. We have A and H, so we must use the triangle for cosine. We want the angle, So we cover cosine. We get cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. We now replace A with 12 and H with 13.5, and we get cosine x is 12 over 13.5. We want the angle, so we must go back from cosine. We use shift cosine. The answer is x is shift cosine this fraction. So we bring in a calculator to do the question. Shift cosine. Shift cosine. This is a fraction, so we use fraction. Up we have 1, 2, 12. We want to come down 13.5. Don't close the bracket now, go to the right. Now close the bracket. Then press equals. This is the answer. We don't want all the answer, we want 0 decimal places, so we go shift, set up, fix, and 0 for decimal places. The answer is 27. So the final answer, x equals 27 degrees, nearest degree. In this question we want to find angle x. 14.6 is opposite to angle x, so we call it opposite letter O. 18 is the longest side, hypotenuse letter H. O and H, we use the sine triangle. We want the angle. Before we do that, we find the sine, cover the sine. Sine is equal to opposite over hypotenuse. Replace the numbers in the question. O is 14.6, H 18 into this equation. You get sine x is this fraction. We want the angle, so we must go back to the angle with shift sine. So x is shift sine this fraction. We now bring in the calculator and do this on a calculator. So shift sine. This is a fraction, so fraction, the top number 14.6, and then come down 1818. Don't close the bracket here. Go to the right, close the bracket, and equals. This is the angle. We don't want decimal places, we want nearest degree, so we go shift, set up, fix, and then 0 for 0 decimals. The answer is 54. So the answer is x equals 54 degrees, nearest degree. In this question we want this angle theta. If we look at the angle and go opposite, we see 3. 3 is opposite to the angle, letter O. This side is the adjacent, letter A. Opposite and adjacent gives us tangent triangle. We want the angle. We must first find tan, so cover tan, and we get tan equals opposite over adjacent. We now replace the two numbers. Opposite becomes 3, adjacent becomes 7 in this, and we get tan theta is 3 over 7. We want to get the angle. From tan we go back, shift tan. So theta is shift tan of this fraction. We now use the calculator. Shift tan, shift tan. This is a fraction, fraction key, 3. Now we've got to come down, 7. Don't close the bracket here, go to the right, now close the bracket, and equals. This is the full answer. We want the answer to the nearest degree, means 0 decimal. Shift, set up, fix is number 6, 0 decimal, 0. The answer is 23 degrees. So theta is equal to 23 degrees, nearest degree. In this question we have a ladder leaning against a wall. Here is the wall, here is the ladder. The ladder is 3.5 meters long, and the angle at the foot of the ladder is 63 degrees. We want the distance up the wall, y. We can look at this and see there is a right angled triangle. We can take it out. We now have to solve for y. This is the angle. If we go opposite, we get y. Y is called the opposite, letter O. This is the longest side, 3.5. It's the hypotenuse, letter H. Opposite hypotenuse is the sine triangle. We want the opposite, so we cover it. And we can see sine multiply H. Opposite is sine multiply H. We now put the numbers in the question. The hypotenuse is 3.5. Don't forget 63 goes with sine. So we get y equals sine 63 times 3.5. We now use a calculator. There is a calculator, so we have to do this. Sine 63. Sine 63. Don't forget to close bracket. Multiply 3.5 equals. We want the answer to one decimal place. This has got too many decimal places. We need to cut it. Shift, set up, cut is fix, so 6 and then 1 decimal. The answer is 3.1. So the final answer, y equals 3.1 meters to 1 decimal place. In this question, we want to find the air distance d. It's the longest side, it's the hypotenuse, so we label it letter H. 5,000 meters is the ground distance. This is the adjacent letter A. With letter A and letter H, we use the cosine triangle. We want to find H, so we cover it. H is equal to adjacent over cosine. We now replace H by the letter D, A by number 5,000. Don't forget, with cosine we need 5 degrees. Here's what we get. We now use a calculator to do this. So this is a fraction key. 5000, that's 5,000. Come down, cosine 5. Don't forget to close the bracket and go to the right. Now you can go equals. There is the answer. We want the answer to the nearest meter, so we use shift, set up, fix is cut, nearest meter is without any decimal, 0 decimal. The answer 5019. So the answer is D equals 5019 meters to the nearest meter. In this question, we want to find angle A. From the angle, we go opposite and we see 400. So 400 is the opposite letter O. 240 is next to the angle, so it's called the adjacent letter A. Opposite and adjacent is the tangent triangle. We want to get A, but first we must find tan. Cover tan. We can see opposite over adjacent. This is the law for tan. We now replace opposite and adjacent by the numbers 400 and 240, and we get the next step. Now, we don't want tan A, we want A. We must go back. Go back to angle A as shift tan. We now use a calculator to do this. So, shift tan. Now this is a fraction, so we just need fraction. 400 is up, 4, 0, 0. Now I want to come down to make the next number, 2, 4, 0. Now look, don't put the bracket close here, close the bracket to the right, So write, close the bracket. Then press equals. Here is the full answer. We don't want the full answer, we want 0 decimal places, nearest degree. So we go Shift, Set Up, now Fix, which is number 6, 0 decimals, so 0 there, and the answer is 59 degrees. So the full answer is angle A is 59 degrees to the nearest degree. In this question, we want to find the angle A. This side is opposite to the angle, so we call it letter O, and this side is adjacent to the angle, so we call it letter A. O and A is tan, so we use the tan triangle. We want to get the angle, but first we must find tan, so we cover tan, and tan equals opposite over adjacent. We now replace opposite and adjacent by the numbers in the question, 2.5 and 24, and we get tan of angle A is 2.5 over 24. Now we want to get the angle, not the tan, so we must go back from this, so we go Shift tan. We now use a calculator to do this. We start Shift, then tan, so Shift, tan. Now this is a fraction. The easiest way is to use the fraction key. We have on the top 2.5. We come down to make the next number 24 to 4. Now don't close the bracket now. First go to the right. Now close the bracket. Then press equals. This is the answer, but we don't want all the answer. We want nearest degree. So we must use Shift, Set Up. We want to fix it, that's number 6. And we want 0 decimals, so we go 0. And the answer is 6 degrees. So to finish, A equals 6 degrees, nearest degree. In this question, we want to find the height of the balloon. This is the line. We go from the angle opposite, and we see that the height is the opposite side. The number in the question is the hypotenuse, letter H. O and H is the sine ratio. We want to find the opposite, so we cover opposite. And we can see opposite is sine multiplied by H. We now replace the hypotenuse with 450, and don't forget 70 degrees would go with sine, and we get H equals sine 70 multiplied by 450. We now use a calculator to do this. So we start with sine 70, close the bracket, remember to close the bracket, and multiply by 450 equals, now this is the full answer. We don't want the full answer. The question says 1 decimal place, so we go Shift, Set Up, Fix, 6, and then 1 decimal place, 1. So the answer is 422.9 meters. Here is the answer, 422.9 meters to 1 decimal place. In this question, we want to find the height of the radio mast. This is the line we need. Here is the angle. If we go opposite, we see that the height is the opposite, letter O. Number 50 along the ground is the adjacent. Opposite with adjacent is the tangent triangle. We want to find the opposite, so we cover it. We can see that opposite is equal to tangent multiply adjacent. We now put the numbers in, The angle is 63, that will go with tan, and the adjacent is 50, that will go with A. So we get the height is tan 63 multiplied by 50. We now use a calculator to do this. So, tan 63, remember to close the bracket, multiply by 50 equals. This is the long answer. We want one decimal place, so we go Shift, Setup, and Fix is number 6, and we want one decimal, so 1. Here is the answer, 98.1. So, the height is 98.1 feet to one decimal place.